The Jazz over the past 5 seasons have been a perennial playoff team, being only one of 3 teams to make the playoffs over that time span every single year, with the Celtics and Bucks joining them on that list. As a franchise, being consistent is very difficult to sustain, but the Jazz have done just that. While being in a small market, they have built their way up to being a respectable team year in and year out, and that comes with expectations. And the Jazz have failed to reach expectations far too often, and it has came to a tipping point after these playoffs. The Jazz just lost to the Mavs in 6 games, with Luka Doncic missing 3 of those games in the series. Yes, Mitchell was kind of banged up towards the end of the series, but they failed to take advantage of the Mavs star being out, as the Jazz made Jalen Brunson look like Luka, for crying out loud. That just adds to the level of disappointment and underachieving that the Jazz have associated themselves with over the past couple years. Like last year, they also failed to take advantage of a star getting injured with Kawhi tearing his ACL. The year before, they blew a 3-1 lead in the bubble, and the previous 2 years, they kind of get a pass because they just lost to a better Houston Rockets team both times. But in my opinion, this core for the Jazz have reached their ceiling, and it's time to go in another direction, not necessarily blow it up, but go in a different route, because obviously this isn't going to work. Welcome back to Just the Facts Hoops. My name is Jimmy, and before we continue, please hit the like button for me first and foremost, as well as comment. That's all I'm asking for. But without further ado, let's hop into this video. The Utah Jazz, as I mentioned, have been one of the more consistent franchises, but they have also been disappointing here in the previous couple years. They have been on the wrong side of history each of the past 3 series they've been eliminated in. Here's a quick little breakdown. In these playoffs, taking on the Dallas Mavericks, the Jazz failed to capitalize on the games that Luka Doncic missed, going down 2-1 during that time frame. In the place of Luka, Jalen Brunson had a couple of huge performances for Dallas. In Game 1, the Mavs easily could have took the game, but ended up losing by 6. However, in Game 2, Jalen Brunson dropped 41 points with 0 turnovers to go along with 5 assists on 60% shooting from the field. That led to Brunson having the most total points in the player's first 2 career playoff starts in NBA history, eclipsing LeBron and Michael Jordan. It seemed like no matter who was on him, it was a bucket. Conley, Mitchell, O'Neal, Clarkson, even Gobert had no answer for him defensively. And that forced other guys to help because they were getting beat off the dribble every single time. That allowed Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, and other guys to get wide open looks in the corner as the Jazz failed to rotate back to shooters. Then on the offensive end, they weren't able to muster enough offense when Donovan Mitchell wasn't getting it going. And even if Mitchell is getting it going, it seems like he has to do so much just for the team to stay afloat in the game. This series was an entire disaster. Going back to last season, in the second round versus the Clippers, Kawhi tore his ACL in Game 4, and most of us thought the Jazz had the upper hand, although we still gave the Clippers a fair shot to win the series. But the Jazz were the 1 seed that year, so the expectations were higher than ever before. Not only did the Clippers take the series, they won the series in 6 games after being down 2-0 to the Jazz. Yeah, Mike Conley pretty much missed the entire series, but still no excuse. No Kawhi, no problem for the Clippers. And in Game 6, the Jazz blew a 25-point lead, allowing the Clippers to come roaring back and win the game by 12 points. Terrence Mann dropped a career high of 39 points, going 7 of 10 from 3 and 15 of 21 from the field. And the primary defender on him was Rudy Gobert. Now ideally, that seems like a good idea to put Gobert on the worst offensive player versus a team that's going small ball, but that turns out to be an issue when the guy's getting open threes and lanes to the basket. It's also an issue when your perimeter defense can't contain anybody to save their lives, so Gobert has to spend his time helping on the drive 24/7. No matter how mediocre an offensive player is, they will have a breakout game if they're being defended like that. And that's what Terrence Mann had. Tough situation to be in. We'll talk more about that later. Going back to the bubble in 2020, the Jazz took on the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, and Utah ended up blowing a 3-1 lead as Jamal Murray had a breakout playoff series. Jamal Murray had one of the best playoff series we've ever seen from a player, period, let alone a guy 25 or younger. After dropping a below average 14 and 12 points in games 2 and 3, Murray decided that enough was enough and proceeded to average 40 points a game on 58% from the field in the final 4 games of the series. He dropped 50 points in game 4, although the Nuggets lost, then proceeded that with a 42-point performance, which led to a win, and then dropped 50 points again, and this time in the Nuggets win. And at that point, there's nothing the Jazz could do to stop him. I remember the Jazz sticking Royce O'Neal onto Murray, and it was no match. The Jazz didn't have any guards who were capable of being a lockdown defender, and that was a huge problem. Mike Conley's defense had already started declining before he arrived in Utah. Mitchell's capable, in my opinion, because he's athletic, strong, and can move laterally, but for some reason, he hasn't been a very good perimeter defender over the past couple years. But all in all, when you look at it, there have been plenty of problems with the Jazz faced over the years, especially come playoff time. Everyone wants to blame Gobert for the repeated downfall of the team, and yes, he doesn't help in some cases, but it's definitely not all his fault. The Jazz have tricked me and many others to believing that they've been a very good defensive team over the past couple years, and they really aren't, as Gobert has cleaned up so many of their mistakes from the rest of the guys, Conley, Mitchell, Clarkson, Bogdanovic. They all get beat off the dribble way too often, and that leads to Gobert having to save the day at the rim 24/7. Those guards don't disrupt the ball handler whatsoever. They don't create any turnovers. In fact, in the past 3 seasons, the Jazz have been at least 20th or worst when it comes to steals, with the worst coming in 2019 when they rated dead last in steals. I mentioned Jamal Murray's performance in the bubble versus them when he dropped 50 points and 42 in back-to-back games. Yeah, he had 0 turnovers combined in those 2 games with a high usage rate. Just in this past series versus Dallas, Jalen Brunson had 4 total turnovers in the series. I could go on, but you get the point. Rudy has to clean up for his teammates' mistakes, so what teams do in the playoffs is go small ball and force Gobert out of the paint to guard a shooter. Then teams will play the drive and kick game, which is easy for them because, once again, Utah's perimeter defense is terrible, and Gobert's natural instinct is to help out whenever one of his guys gets beat off the dribble, so he slides into the paint to avoid giving up a layup, and it usually leaves the corner 3 wide open. And when teams run this to perfection, it seems like Gobert's the bad guy, when in reality, he's just put in a very tough situation. And Quinn Snyder is one of the best coaches in the game in my opinion, but his lack of adjustments in that department year in and year out has disappointed me and many others. A counter to this whole argument would to be, well, take Gobert out of the game completely, but that would make everything even worse, I think. If the perimeter defense was stout, then you could have an argument there, but Gobert's inability to be mobile enough does take away from the flexibility of the team. I believe the defense is the main culprit of the downfall of the team, but offensively, we can't let them off the hook either. They live by the 3 and die by the 3, let's just face it. Over the past 2 to 3 years, they've took the most threes and made the most threes. This year, they were second in mace and second in attempts, but only 11th in percentage. Last year, much better, as they were first in makes and attempts, but 4th in percentage. In 2020, they were 7th in makes, 10th in attempts, but 1st in percentage. So the moral of the story is that they take a bunch of threes, and as time has gone on, they've gotten worse and worse at it. Versus the Mavs in the playoffs, the Jazz shot an abysmal 28% from 3, dead last among playoff teams. Huge drop off from even their regular season 36% from 3, which also isn't even that great. So when the 3-pointer isn't falling and Mitchell's not hitting, the Jazz just don't look scary or impressive offensively. It might look like I'm hating, but I'm not hating on the Jazz at all. I'm just here to state just the facts. They have been one of the better teams over the past couple years, but they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, especially with the Rudy Gobert situation. They signed Gobert to a 5-year, $205 million contract extension back in 2020, and I think that contract is going to be a challenge to trade. Not impossible, but yet a challenge. If I'm the Utah Jazz, there's no way in hell I'm even thinking about trading Donovan Mitchell unless he walks in my office and demands himself being traded. The whole trade Gobert thing is tricky, however, because the defensive system is literally built around him, and without him, the Jazz would not be good collectively defensively at all. And I didn't even mention the off-the-court relationship with Mitchell and Gobert, which was described to be unsalvageable. and these guys can't stand each other. I don't know how much truth there is to that. I don't know why that might be. I think it all started before the pandemic started with what Rudy Gobert did. We all know what he did, but I'm not sure if that played a role in it. I'm not sure if it's something else that happened behind the scenes that we don't know about. If you're a Jazz fan and you're watching this, please let me know, because I'm kind of confused here. Mike Conley's over the hill at this point in his career. Him getting paid $22 million a year at this point is just a big yikes. He doesn't show up in the playoffs anymore. He's not a very good defender like he was in the past. He had 3 games in which he scored 6 points or less in this Dallas series. They have to find a way to get rid of his contract, even though I don't know how. But there are Donovan Mitchell trade rumors out there as well. Like I said, I'm not taking a chance of trading a guy when I'm a small market that fails to, really generate a lot of revenue, and ticket sales are always going to be tough to come by in a smaller market. So why not keep your electrifying star player unless he wants to leave? Quinn Snyder, there were reports of him that he might be the new Lakers head coach here pretty soon. I think he should stay. I don't think they should fire him, but if Quinn Snyder wants to explore different options, that it makes a lot of sense to me, because there's not much more you could do with this roster. Y'all let me know where the Jazz should go from here, because it's been at least 3 years in a row of disappointment. They've disappointed year in and year out. So it's time for a change, in my opinion. So y'all let me know about the Jazz, what y'all think. Jazz fans, hop in here and tell me what y'all think. But with that being said, make sure to like this video. Like I said, y'all, make sure to comment something down below. With that being said, this is Jimmy from Just the Facts Hoops, and I'm out. Peace.